She was once the most dangerous woman in Hollywood, not for what she did, but for what she refused to become. At 93, Angie Dickinson has nothing left to lose and no silence left to keep. For decades, she played by their rules, smiled through betrayal, and survived a world built to break women like her. But now, everything has changed. The gloves are off, and she's ready to name the men who broke her. 5 men, 5 icons once worshipped by the world. 5 who used love, power, and lies to take everything she had. This isn't a confession, it's a reckoning. And the truth, as she tells it, isn't glamorous. It's raw, cold, and long overdue. Before the spotlight, before fame, Angie Dickinson was just a girl from North Dakota, armed with nothing but a notebook full of poems and a hunger to be more than what the world expected of her. No training, no powerful family name, just ambition, a hypnotic stare, and a quiet fire that made people stop and notice. She wasn't loud, she didn't play coy, she simply existed in a way that demanded attention and that made her dangerous. But in the Hollywood of the 1950s, danger had no place in a woman's career unless it came dressed in lipstick and silk. When Angie Dickinson met Burt Bacharach, it felt like destiny. Hollywood's golden actress and the genius composer whose music defined a generation. To the public, they were a dream couple, a perfect blend of glamour and artistry. The media called their love story a fairy tale, and for a while, Angie believed it too. But behind the gates of their Beverly Hills home, the cracks began to show. Burt was distant, consumed by his work and ego. Late-night sessions, last-minute trips, and unexplained absences became routine. Angie excused it at first, telling herself it was the price of genius. But even before their daughter Nikki was born, the warmth had faded. Their marriage had turned from partnership into performance. When Nikki arrived, Angie's life changed forever. Nikki was born with a developmental disorder, and from that moment, Angie devoted herself entirely to her daughter. But Burt couldn't handle the reality. He withdrew, vanishing behind studio walls and concert tours. The more Angie gave, the less he showed up. One night, after Nikki was hospitalized during a severe episode, Angie called Burt in tears. His response was cold, detached. "Will this delay my flight to Europe?" That was the night Angie's faith in him broke. From then on, she fought alone, learning every medical term, every therapy, every treatment that might give Nikki a better life. She turned down roles, interviews, and red carpets, quietly stepping back from Hollywood to be the mother her daughter needed. Meanwhile, Burt lived untouched by their struggles, basking in applause, surrounded by adoration and other women. His betrayal deepened when Angie discovered he had begun an affair while she was still pregnant. Still, she remained silent, protecting him from scandal because that was what women were expected to do. Years later came the cruelest moment. Nikki needed specialized treatment that required Burt's approval. Angie called repeatedly, begging him to respond. When he finally picked up, his words shattered what little hope remained. "Don't call me again unless she's dead." It was the end of everything. Not just a marriage, but trust, love, and illusion. Their divorce in 1981 was labeled amicable by the press. But behind that word was a story of abandonment and quiet endurance. When Nikki passed away decades later, Burt didn't come to the funeral. No call, no flowers, nothing. Angie stood alone, delivering her daughter's eulogy to a room of strangers. The final proof that she had always been the only one fighting. For years, she said nothing. She never wrote a tell-all, never sought revenge. But now at 93, Angie no longer guards the truth. Burt Bacharach may have written songs that moved the world, but to her, he was the man who walked away from a daughter who only wanted love. And yet, her story didn't end with heartbreak. The next man she faced wasn't a lover. He was a gatekeeper, a powerful figure who decided who worked, who faded, and who vanished. When Angie refused him, the punishment was silent but devastating. One man, one decision, one erasure. That was how Hollywood worked. And Angie Dickinson, once its brightest star, learned that no amount of beauty or talent could protect a woman from the quiet power of a man who wanted her gone. Then she met Frank Sinatra. The world called them the golden couple, but even gold can burn. Frank didn't love her the way the magazines claimed. He owned her. At first, he was a prince. Flowers every morning, candles at dinners where waiters hardly dared to breathe, moments that felt like scenes from a movie. And for a while, Angie believed it. She believed she could have both love and freedom, but the curtain soon fell. He didn't hit, he didn't yell. He just took pieces of her every time she got closer to independence. When she accepted a role that required a kiss, the script disappeared. When she tried to stand on her own, everything she cared about vanished with it. Frank wasn't just the man she loved. He was the one who silenced her voice and turned her freedom into a crime. When she signed a deal he didn't approve of, She came home to broken picture frames and a silence that felt colder than any winter night. She wasn't his partner. She was his property. Hollywood called them perfect, the golden pair, the storybook romance. But no one saw the fear hiding behind her smile, the way her laughter trembled when the cameras weren't rolling. Every glance, every gesture, every word had to be measured. Every man she worked with had to be cleared, and when she dared to push back, even softly, even once, the punishment came fast and precise. One phone call from Frank and the deals vanished. One act of defiance and the offers dried up overnight. The moment that broke her didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It came quietly in the dark. At 2 in the morning, Angie had just been cast in the role of her career, a film the critics were already whispering about. But Frank didn't care about her success, only his control. He picked up the phone, his voice steady, his tone polite, and ended her future in a single sentence. Keep her in that film and your career ends here. By sunrise, her role was gone. No reason, no apology, just silence. And in that silence, Angie finally understood what he truly loved. Not her heart, not her soul, but the power to decide when she could shine. She stayed for years, not out of love, not out of fear, but because a part of her still believed the man she met in the beginning might come back. He never did. He became a ghost that still gripped her life long after he was gone. Even when their story ended, his shadow followed her. Phone calls stopped. Invitations disappeared. She was still Angie Dickinson, but no longer Hollywood's darling. She'd been marked, and Hollywood never forgets its marks. Still, she said nothing. That's what women were taught to do. Move on, stay quiet with a wound like jewelry no one could see. But silence doesn't heal, it festers. And now at 93, she's done pretending it didn't happen. Frank Sinatra, the man who sang about love, who made the world swoon, made her vanish one quiet command at a time. He didn't need violence. He had something far stronger, a voice the whole world obeyed. And after Frank came a man who broke something far deeper. Not her will, but her place as a mother. A man who didn't just leave her behind, but walked away from a child who never had a say in any of it. Angie had already lost her career once, but what came next nearly cost her soul. The husband who turned his back on their daughter. For most of her life, Angie Dickinson carried herself with a kind of grace that made pain look effortless. On screen, she was captivating, a woman who could command attention without ever raising her voice. Off-screen, her quiet was often mistaken for peace. But that silence wasn't serenity, it was survival. She had learned how to hide heartbreak behind perfect posture, to smile through the kind of sorrow that couldn't be spoken aloud. Because in her world, emotion was weakness and vulnerability was something a woman could never afford. Behind every photo hoot, every interview, every flawless red carpet appearance, there was a woman trying to hold together something already cracked. Not her career, not her reputation, her family, or at least what was left of it. His name was Jack Webb. To the public, he was a television pioneer, a master of realism who brought grit and integrity to the screen. He created hits that defined a generation, built a reputation as a no-nonsense genius, and shaped the culture of his time. To young actresses, he was a gatekeeper. To Angie Dickinson, he was something worse. Proof that no woman in Hollywood was ever truly safe. Their connection began early. In her career, Jack was casting a new crime series, and Angie was being considered for a recurring role. They met in his office, surrounded by awards, scripts, and photographs of stars who owed him everything. Jack spoke in short, clipped sentences, confident and controlled. He praised her recent work, told her she had something rare, something in her eyes that others didn't. Angie left the meeting certain she had the part. The audition was strong, the chemistry right, everything felt aligned. But that night, the phone rang. Not from Jack, but from one of his producers. The message was simple. The role was no longer available. No reason, no apology, just finality. Hours earlier, her agent had said things looked promising. So, what changed? The answer came quietly over dinner with a friend who worked behind the scenes. Jack had made an advance. It wasn't crude or loud. It was subtle, a quiet test of power. Angie had declined, thinking professionalism would be enough. But Jack didn't take rejection well. Within 24 hours, 3 of her upcoming roles disappeared. Projects she had spent weeks preparing for were gone without a trace. Meetings that had once been confirmed began disappearing without explanation. Calls went unanswered. Emails were ignored. The silence was too deliberate to be coincidence. And that's when Angie knew it wasn't about a bad audition or a rewritten script. It was one choice, one man, one punishment. Jack never confronted her. He didn't argue or threaten. He simply erased her quietly and efficiently, as if crossing her name off a list. She didn't vanish from the public eye. She vanished from a system that kept actresses alive in Hollywood. Casting directors stopped calling. Studios offered her roles that mocked what she'd already achieved. Background characters, single-line cameos, mothers to actors barely older than her. She had been a leading lady. Now she was being pushed to the margins. Meanwhile, Jack Webb only rose higher. More awards, more power, more respect. No one questioned why Angie's light had dimmed. They said she'd chosen to step back, maybe to rest, maybe to live quietly. But the truth was something no one dared to say out loud. In Hollywood, calling out a man like Jack Webb wasn't brave. It was career suicide. Angie didn't stay silent because she was scared. She stayed silent because she knew the truth wouldn't matter. Men like him weren't punished for quiet sabotage. They were promoted for it, so she smiled for the cameras. She played the part of the gracious actress taking time off, even as her career was slowly strangled by silence. What haunted her wasn't just the loss of work. It was the realization that everything she had built, every risk she had taken, could be undone in a single moment by a man who barely knew her. She had believed her name meant something, that her work had earned her a place in Hollywood history. But fame was conditional, success was fleeting, and respect was never promised. Not when it was being negotiated behind closed doors. Years passed. Jack Webb faded from headlines. When he died in 1982, he was remembered as a legend, celebrated as a pioneer. His shows were replayed, his legacy praised. But Angie never forgot. Not out of vengeance, but because silence was how it kept happening. She never gave interviews condemning him, never filed lawsuits, never wrote a book. But in private, she kept the story alive, not as anger, but as truth. Because she knew there would be others, other women, other careers buried in the same quiet way. And now at 93, Angie doesn't whisper anymore. She speaks clearly because there's nothing left to lose. Jack Webb didn't just take a role from her. He altered the course of her life. She doesn't call it bitterness, she calls it memory. And she knows now it was never only her. She had heard the whispers for years in dim corners of industry parties, behind the polished smiles at award shows. Stories of women who said no and then vanished. Names erased from casting lists. Careers cut short without explanation. Some never came back. Others disappeared quietly, moving away, changing names, pretending they had never dreamed at all. But Angie didn't leave, not because she owed Hollywood anything, but because she refused to let them erase her completely. She adapted. She took roles with less spotlight, but greater substance. Slowly, audiences remembered why she mattered. Yet, the wound never healed. Not because she wanted redemption, but because she deserved a chance that wasn't stolen from her. And this part of her story isn't just about Jack Webb. It's about a system designed to protect the powerful and silence the rest. Angie names him not to destroy his reputation, but to reclaim her own. But her reckoning didn't end there. Because the next man wasn't a jealous lover or a vengeful producer. He was something far more dangerous. A man who used love as control, who replaced affection with fear so gradually that Angie didn't see the trap closing until it was too late. The obsession that masqueraded as love. There is a kind of love that looks like devotion but tastes like control. Love that speaks softly, holds tightly, and leaves no visible bruises. 4. Angie Dickinson, the most dangerous man she ever knew, wasn't the one who broke her heart or ruined her career. It was the man who claimed to worship her, who watched her every move with possessive adoration. His name was Larry King, and what he called love, Angie later understood was captivity. When they met, she was vulnerable, fresh from divorce, weary from years in the spotlight. She was ready for calm. Larry seemed different, gentle, thoughtful, someone who saw past the glamour. He didn't chase her with fame or power. He listened, and after years of being adored for her image, listening felt like love. At first, his care felt comforting. He wanted to know how she slept, what she ate, who she trusted. She thought it was concern, but love slowly turned into monitoring. He asked her to call when she arrived somewhere. Then he discouraged certain co-stars. Soon he was reading every script before she could sign. He said it was for her protection, that only he could shield her from Hollywood's cruelty. She wanted to believe him until she realized how small her world had become. Friends stopped calling. Invitations went unanswered. Larry never forbade her outright. He just gave her reasons not to go. And if she laughed too freely, if someone else made her smile, his silence would say more than any argument could. If she smiled at someone for too long, he would go cold. And every apology she offered only deepened the trap. He'd remind her she was his reason to live. Larry never raised his voice or his hand. He didn't need to. His power came from quiet manipulation, for making her believe that love was something she had to earn by obeying. He turned affection into control, attention into surveillance. He studied her like a subject, analyzing every pause, every breath. When she strayed from his invisible rules, he broke down. Once during a small argument, he smashed his head into a mirror, blood running down his face as he whispered that she was the only thing keeping him alive. Angie didn't walk away, not because she didn't see the danger, but because she didn't have the words for what it was. Back then, no one talked about emotional abuse. If there were no bruises, no police reports, the world assumed you were safe. But she wasn't. She was disappearing. One day, she found a small microphone hidden under the seat of her car. When she confronted him, he didn't deny it. He called it intimacy, said it helped him understand her better. She couldn't tell if she was more frightened or heartbroken. Each time she tried to leave, he returned, crying, begging, sending letters filled with desperate apologies and promises of forever. But it wasn't love anymore. It was obsession. The breaking point came after a missed call. Angie had been in a meeting, one that could have reignited her career. When she came home, every photo of them was destroyed, every page of her journals torn to pieces. He stood amid the wreckage and said, "If I can't be in your life the way I need to be, I don't want to be in it at all." That night, she didn't cry. She just lay awake, trying to remember when she'd first surrendered her freedom. But there was no clear moment. It had happened quietly, disguised as devotion. The next morning, she left. No confrontation, no dramatic goodbye. She packed a small bag, took Nikki, and vanished into a small apartment where no one could find her. For weeks, she kept the blinds drawn and the phone unplugged. She needed distance, not only from him, but from the version of herself that had mistaken control for care. Years later, people would ask why she never told the full story, why she stayed silent. Angie only said that sometimes you don't recognize what happened to you until long after it's over, and by then, you're too tired to explain. Now, at 93, she no longer shields those who dimmed her light. She doesn't speak from anger, but from understanding. If she had known then what she knows now, she would have left sooner. And if her story reaches someone who feels that same quiet fear, maybe they'll find the courage to walk away too. But Larry wasn't the final betrayal. That one came from someone she thought she could trust. Not a lover, not a husband, but a friend. A man who smiled beside her under studio lights, then spoke a single line that shattered her dignity before millions. His name was Johnny Carson. He invited her onto his show to celebrate her legacy. The stage lights glowed. The crowd rose to their feet. The applause was thunder. Angie stepped forward, ready to accept what she had earned. But before she could speak, Johnny leaned in, pulled her close for a camera-ready hug, and whispered, "I just saved you from being humiliated. Don't make me regret it." Earlier that day, someone had shown him a leaked clip, an old interview where Angie mentioned a now-disgraced producer she'd once worked with. The footage never aired. Johnny buried it, not to protect her, but to control the moment. On live television, he turned her silence into a performance. To the audience, he praised her as a woman who knew when to speak and when to stay quiet. The crowd cheered. The camera caught her smiling, but inside she felt something shatter. After that night, her name began to vanish. No nominations, no calls, no invitations. Not because of scandal, but because of whispers. In Hollywood, exile doesn't come from headlines. It comes from silence passed quietly between powerful men. Angie never forgot. She carried it not as anger, but as truth. Now at 93, she finally breaks the silence. She isn't looking for sympathy or redemption. She's reclaiming her story. The names she speaks are not daggers, but mirrors reflecting the hidden cruelty behind the glamour. Her story is not just confession, it's testimony. If her voice moves you, let it be heard. Share it. Because behind every shining star, there are stories the world was never meant to remember. And Angie Dickinson has decided that forgetting is no longer an option.